Hello my friends, today we're going to go ahead and meet on our mats for a class that I call Restorative Reading. So this was a class that my students really seem to enjoy, where you can find cozy yoga poses that you hold for 3 to 5 minutes while you're reading your favorite books. This is a pro tip right here. Get the large print from the library. Makes it a lot easier when you're reading in your different restorative reading poses. So just to really quick give you a little heads up, I have a bolster here. It's a bigger bolster. You can use pillows at home. I have a couple blocks. You can use, yoga blocks are pretty cheap, you can get some. Otherwise, books, maybe a really firmly folded towel could work. We'll use them in different ways. There's gonna be lots of ways for you to modify if you're doing this at home. And then obviously having your water close by. So what's gonna happen, it'll be nice and quiet. At times, I promise I'll come back to my voice, but I'll leave you for 3 to 5 minutes once we get settled into a pose, and then I'll tell you to find your bookmark, and that's how you'll know that we'll be ready to move on to the next pose. So what we're gonna do first, we're gonna set up with our bolster behind us. So we're gonna take a reclined butterfly, but I'm gonna set mine up with a block and then my bolster on top. So once I feel like that's where I want to be, move my hips to find my bolster, and then deciding how close or how far I want my feet to be. It's up to how I find this pose to be comfort. In restorative poses, we're supposed to allow our body's time for rest. So these are restorative poses that you can find that maybe will give your body rest while your mind gets a little bit of a workout while you read. So go ahead, find your version of this pose, make adjustments as you need to, and then we'll go ahead and take a few minutes to read in a nice supported pose. So go ahead, find your bookmark. moment to bring your knees back together. Maybe drop them from one side to the next. So that was kind of a big hip opener to start with. But if you feel like you need a little more support, you can always shift your legs farther or closer. When you're ready, we're going to go ahead and move towards our stomachs. So get the bolster out of your way, move your block. So this is the pose that gets my students giggling the most, because this is the pose that many of us sat in, if we're book nerds, reading as young children. So the laying on your bed reading pose, where my head is sunk into my shoulders and my legs are all akimbo behind me. So what I would like you to do is find your Sphinx pose. So your elbows should be underneath your shoulders, kind of having your toes touch behind you. And then you should be thinking about sending your heart forward and relaxing into that lower back space. So you shouldn't feel a crunch in your lower back. And then you can use your bolster or your block, maybe to hold your book up in front of you. But you're just going to go ahead and find your comfort here for a few minutes, and then we'll shift into our next pose. As we move from pose to pose, I'll give you some counter movements as well. If in this pose at all you would like to, you can look over your right shoulder bending into your left knee, or look over your left shoulder bending into your right knee. Or you can stay still for this whole pose. If anything ever feels too intense, you can always take your head down and bring it back up and shimmy things out of your shoulders. So let's go ahead, settle into your Sphinx pose, and we'll go ahead and have a few moments of stillness here. Find your bookmark again. Maybe take your arms out in front of you, place your forehead on top of your stacked hands, bending into your knees, maybe windshield wide from side to side. If you're looking for another counter pose, you can always pop back into child's pose or embryo pose. And then if you come back down to your stomach, we're gonna go ahead and set up for a half frog pose. So you wanna get your bolster next to your hip, and we're just gonna take one knee, we're gonna bring it up and out, sitting on the bolster. I always joke that there's different settings on bolsters. So you can have it up high if that feels good, have it down low. Some people don't like having a bolster at all, so if you prefer to take half frog with your leg out in front of you, that's fine. Again, now you're down here on your forearms maybe. Maybe you just read from this point here. You can go ahead and take hand to head, head to hand. But finding where your half frog feels best. For me, I like my half frog up on a bolster. So we're gonna take just a couple minutes in this pose and then we'll switch to the other side. I hope you're enjoying your books. Go ahead and come back to our book, find your bookmark. And then slowly and gently bring your leg back. Again, get any wiggles out that you might need. And then let's go ahead and move the bolster to the opposite side. Always honoring and recognizing that the sides of your body are not the same, and that's okay. We're gonna go ahead and decide where placement feels right on the other hip. So kind of making any adjustments with your bolster. I like to make sure that my foot and my knee are both on the bolster, making sure that my knees are, well, my knees pointing out and my toes are pointing out and my foot is flexed. So I can already tell, like in this pose, I feel a little bit more tightness on my left side. So I'm gonna try and maybe keep myself a little bit more lifted than I did on the other side. But just listening to your body and deciding what works best for you, that's how you best handle a restorative practice, especially one where you're trying to let your body become quiet. So while we let our body settle into this pose, we get back to our book and just taking a few minutes here. Okay, go ahead, find your bookmark. Again, maybe dropping down, letting your head rest on your hands, rocking your legs from side to side, taking any wiggles out of your hips that you need. You should have enough time for 2, maybe 3 poses. So we're going to leave our bolster where it is and we're going to come to our back. So just kind of flipping over, finding our space on our back. So we did some work to open our hips, and so now we'll do some work to rotate our hip the other way. So as soon as I find my book, good, I'm going to hug my knee in, kind of rock it from side to side, roll my ankle, get all those good feelings that you need to when you're about to settle into a pose. And then I'm going to take my knee across my chest, so supine twist here. Again, finding it. This time I like my bolster on a higher level, and then adjusting as I need to before I settle in. Again, taking your time. And then once you feel like you're ready, you can go ahead and take your book and take a few minutes to get a nice stretch on the outside of your hip here. Go ahead and find your bookmark. Unwind here. Maybe hug that knee back in. Kind of some rotations here. Maybe hug both knees in. Making small circles with your hands. Now, if you take these poses and you try them on your own, what's nice is that you don't have anybody telling you when to start and when to stop. So if you feel great in a pose and you want to hold it longer, you can. So you're just using this video hopefully as a tool to figure out what poses work well for your body while you enjoy reading, as opposed to some of the silly poses we find ourselves in. So I'm hugging my left knee in, kind of moving it around until I find that supine twist. Again, pulling it up on a higher setting. Until I feel like I'm in a spot where I can stay comfortably for a few minutes. And then grab you for your book. Go ahead and find your bookmark. Again, hugging that knee in, finding some movement in your hip, maybe hugging both knees in, dropping from side to side, or finding those small movements with your knees. Our last pose is going to be legs up the wall. So if you have wall space, great. If not, then you could always put your hips up on a bolster or a rolled up blanket would be nice. But we're going to go ahead for the last few minutes. And for some of my students, if I give them more options of more time, this is where they spend their time. To access the wall is actually the trickiest part, I always feel. So you're going to take your hips to the wall sideways and then kind of lean back and then scooch up the wall. You can decide where is more comfortable for you. You don't have to be flat up against the wall, you can be close. You can have your feet pointed or flexed or move. You can take your legs out wide, and a little movement is just fine in this pose, so you decide where you want to feel more comfortable. If you feel like your feet are falling asleep, just give your toes a little wiggle. Then when you're ready, go ahead and find your book. And some people in this pose, and my blocks are a little far away, like to put their elbows up on blocks and hold their book up here a little bit easier. So whatever works for you is good for me. So let's spend the last few minutes of our restorative reading practice legs up the wall. Or if you prefer, you can take Shavasana to traditional corpse pose. Then when you're ready, go ahead, throw in your bookmark. Maybe hug your knees in, give them a little wiggles. And then when you're ready, you're gonna come up to a seated pose. I hope you enjoyed your restorative reading class. I hope you got through some of your good book and you feel a little bit more safe and protected in your body, as opposed to when we find some of our silly reading poses, especially when we're really into a good book. Thank you again for joining my 30 minutes of yoga a day challenge. Thank you all for being here.